And now, here's your host, Kevin Conover.
Bring your tithe and bring your shame.
Welcome to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. My website is educateforlife.org. And you know, there's a popular question out there that comes up a lot of times whenever you talk about Christianity and you talk about Christian history. People will often say that Hitler was a Christian, and therefore Christians aren't exempt from the problems that are caused by religion or whatever the case. You'll often hear skeptics say something like, hey, religion is the cause of a lot of the problems. They'll bring up things like the crusade. They'll bring up things about Hitler being a Christian and so forth. And oftentimes, you know, I've heard people say Hitler was actually influenced by evolution. And so you have this back and forth, and it's a question that I've always wanted an answer to. And today I have a very special guest on the show because he is an expert on this very issue. His name is Dr. Richard Weikart. Dr. Weikart, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Weikart authored a book called From Darwin to Hitler. He's currently just recently published a book called The Death of Humanity. And coming up is a book called Hitler's Religion. Is that right, Dr. Weikart?
That's correct.
Yeah. When does that come out, Hitler's Religion?
It's going to come out in November.
Okay, fantastic. Now, if Dr. Weikart was also on the movie Expelled, Ben Stein was in this movie, and I remember seeing you for the first time and watching you. You were at that was filmed. Where was that filmed in Germany?
We filmed in two different places. One was at Hadamar, which was a place where the Nazis carried out some of their so-called euthanasia program, where they killed at that particular site over 10,000 disabled Germans. And then we also filmed some at Dachau, the concentration camp in southern Germany. Okay,
yes, that's right. And that's where I was introduced to what you were doing and everything. I thought it was really interesting. And I had this I went to an evolutionary seminar a while back, and we sat down in a circle, and it was all people. It was set to celebrate Darwin's birthday. I just like to put myself out there in these kind of situations just to learn from people who don't agree with me. And I was sitting in a circle, and I said to the guy that was leading it, I said, is it true that some races are more evolved than other races? And I think this question kind of took him aback.
I'm sure it did.
But I was thinking to myself, well, hey, if we've all evolved, well, it makes sense that some races are more evolved than others. And he looked at me, and everybody in the group just went silent. And he looked at me and he said, well, that's an interesting question, but I think we should focus on other issues. And so he moved the discussion on very quickly. But Dr. Weikart, I just wanted to ask you, how did you get started in this interest in, nobody as a little kid goes, you know what, I really want to study Hitler and, these sorts of things as I get older. What caused you to move in this direction? And, where did that road take you? Did you grow up in a Christian family?
I grew up in a family that was a Christian, at least nominally, although I didn't receive Christ until I was 16, and partly through influences coming from outside of my family and the church that I grew up in. It was actually part of the Jesus People movement where I was saved in 1974.
And now where was that? What part of
that was in Colorado Springs, where my parents lived, yeah.
So now, I'm curious, what happened there, the Jesus movement?
Oh, they had some Christian communes in the area. There were a lot of hippies that were people coming out of drug culture that were getting saved there. And the particular place where I got saved was a home meeting that was meeting on Friday evenings. They would start at 8 o'clock and sometimes go till 11 or midnight and sing a lot of songs, praise songs and such like that.
That's great.
And there's very lively, much different than what I'd experienced in sort of liturgical church where I'd grown up.
Sure. So you experienced the relational aspect of Christianity.
Yeah, and actually I'd never heard that in the church I grew up in, that you could have a relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
You always had faith in Christ. That was what was always stressed. But that you could actually know Christ and that he would talk to you and speak to you and such. That was new to me at that time, yeah.
And that made all the difference, huh?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's so great. Okay, so you're 16, you get saved, you move on, you're going through high school. What's going through your mind? You get to college. How do you move towards this study of the connection between Hitler and evolution?
Well, actually, interestingly, I was very interested in Darwinism fairly early on when I was a teenager. In fact, I think it was even before I had my conversion experience. I was studying things about Darwinism, and I was skeptical about it a good bit. But I sort of dropped that for quite a while. When I did my undergraduate studies, I got interested in European intellectual history of ideas, and I read Francis Schaeffer's works and was interested in how there had been moral decline caused by many of the philosophies in Europe, especially coming out of Europe, but also in the United States in the 19th and 20th centuries.
For example, give us some examples when you say there's moral decline based on intellectual ideas. What are you talking about?
Well, Schaeffer basically tried to track it back to Hegel, although I think Kant was actually a big influence too in bringing about this the notion, even though Kant still did believe in deontological kind of ethics or objective kind of morality.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, his view that there was this distinction between what he called the noumenal realm and the phenomenal realm, the noumenal realm being the realm of God and ethics and such, and the phenomenal realm being the realm of nature and such. He drew the strict dichotomy between those two, which I think was sort of helped produce later philosophies such as Hegel's and others that Schaeffer focused on as being sort of bringing in these ideas of historicism, which means the idea that things change historically over time, including morality. So the idea is that morality then just changes over time. So I got interested in intellectual history as an undergraduate, but then I actually went to Germany for several years and lived there to learn the language. I actually stayed longer than I expected there. Came back and went to grad school, and I wasn't really thinking about Darwinism at the time, but through an incident where the professor that I was thinking about working with under European intellectual history when I got to the University of Iowa for my PhD work, transferred somewhere else, and so I ended up working with a historian of science that did German science.
Yeah.
And so I decided to work with him on the history of German Darwinism and themes related to that for my dissertation. Well, my dissertation was actually on the reception of Darwinism by German socialists in the late 19th century. So Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and others.
Wow, that's so
like
interesting. So Karl Marx, would you say that communism was influenced by evolutionary thought?
Well, actually, Marx was influenced more by Hegel than by Darwin. In fact, Darwin's publications didn't come about till after Marx had already developed most of his ideas. But they were definitely evolutionary kinds of ideas, social evolution going on. Interestingly, though, once Darwin published his work, Marx and Engels both thought that it was wonderful, the idea about biological evolution, because it got rid of the idea of teleology. And Engels even says this in a letter that he wrote to Marx. He said, this gets rid of teleology. That's wonderful. No more purpose in the universe.
Yeah. Now, most of our listeners probably don't know what teleology is, but can you explain that real quick?
Yeah, it's the idea that there's purpose in the universe, so that the universe has a purpose, that there's meaning to life and such. And so they thought this was great that it got rid of any kind of notion of purpose in the universe, because they were atheistic and they didn't believe there was any overarching meaning or purpose to life.
And if there's no overarching purpose or meaning, then basically you can make your own playground. And essentially that's what they did with communism, was say, hey, we've created a whole new world. These are the new rules for the new world.
Although interesting, I think I think there's tensions in their worldview because I think there's a sense in which they do seem to think that there are some kind of objective realities and objective truths. I mean, Marx tried to pose as a scientist of society, for example. So he does try to pose as having some natural laws of society that he talks about this. So, I mean, I think there's some basic tensions within his worldview that sort of undercuts his own position. The
proletariat, the bourgeoisie, the rules that happen there and everything. Okay, very interesting, huh? So what we want to talk about here is it true that there is an influence, that Hitler was influenced by evolutionary views, Darwinism and so forth? Because why is that an important question to answer?
Well, interestingly, I didn't even think that was an important question when I first started my research on some of these topics. I was actually looking at the history of Darwinism in Germany, and I started off when I was doing my dissertation about the reception by the socialists. I noticed that there were a lot of Darwinists who were trying to replace Judeo-Christian ethics with evolutionary ethics, and that piqued my interest. I was always interested in the moral decline and such, so this got me interested. Okay, how did this play itself out in the history of morality? So I decided to do a research project on evolutionary ethics in Germany in the late 19th century. And I wasn't even thinking about Hitler. In fact, I thought that the Nazi period was pretty overworked. And so I wasn't even thinking that I was going to do anything relating to Nazism. But the more I started studying evolutionary ethics, the more I started realizing, it seems like Hitler was an evolutionary ethicist himself. Sounds like he was embracing evolutionary ethics of a type. And so thus I made the connection, and that's how my book From Darwin to Hitler came about.
That's fantastic. Well, my guest today is Dr. Richard Weikart, and we've got a lot to talk about. I think this subject is very interesting, and not only is it very interesting theoretically, but it has very practical implications for our lives and how we think and our culture today. And so we're going to be right back. Again, my guest is Dr. Richard Weikart. And if you'd like to visit his website, it's darwintohitler.com. I'm your guest today on Educate for Life. I'm not your guest. I'm your host today on Educate for Life Radio, Kevin Conover. We're going to be right back.
What do leading local restaurants have in common? They depend on Express Fix Coffee for new and used coffee and espresso machines, repairs, and affordable monthly service. Dave Martin and his local team provide water filtration services too. Call San Diego's best espresso repair company, serving your home and business. Learn more online at expressfixcoffee.com. Call Express Fix Coffee at 619-867-3853. 619-867-3853.
Hi, this is Jason Hall, president of Team Home Loans, a branch of Synergy One Lending. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Conover for the profound impact he's had on mine and my wife's spiritual life, as well as being an incredible teacher while our kids were his students. His knowledge and passion have taught us all how important it is to be defenders of our faith. It's our honor and privilege to support Kevin and his show. It is our sincere hope and prayer that you will continue to learn to be defenders of your faith through Kevin's radio show and through his Educate for Life teachings. Thank you, Kevin, from the Hall family and Team Home Loans.
Add historic American beauty to your home today with genuine Amish furniture. It's built in the USA from solid cherry wood with a bourbon finish. Or choose alternative woods and finishes to accent your home's decor. You'll find it all at Tucker's Valley Furniture. For over 65 years, the Tucker family has served San Diego County. Still family owned. Cash and Carry and Tucker's Valley Furniture. 2 stores, both right across the street at Main and Mollison in El Cajon. Learn more at tuckersvalleyfurniture.com.
When you need tires or service, count on Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service in Oceanside for a full range of affordable options and all the brands you trust. See their great customer reviews and special offers online. Hours Tuesday through Friday, 7:30 to 5:30, and Saturdays, 7:30 to 5. Call Dan and his team at 760-439-1631. Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service, 2405 Oceanside Boulevard in Oceanside, 760-439-1631.
I will cast my cares on you. You're the anchor of my hope, the only one who's in control.
Thanks for listening today. This is Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover, and my website is educateforlife.org. If you didn't get to hear this whole program, you can listen to it on my website. We got a podcast. We got it on YouTube. You can look up lots of previous shows, all kinds of fantastic stuff out there. My guest today is Dr. Richard Weikart, and he is an expert on the relationship between Darwinism and Hitler. And, there's a lot of skeptics out there. They hear this and immediately they go, oh my gosh, a bunch of Christians trying to make evolution look bad by connecting it to Hitler. But has that been a response you've gotten when you wrote your book, Darwin to Hitler, Dr. Weikart?
Oh, yeah, quite often, in fact. And there's the so-called Godwin's Law that is out there. I don't know if you've heard of this, but the Godwin's Law is the idea that every discussion of any kind of evil automatically degenerates down to Hitler, and Hitler will eventually get mentioned as being a parallel with any particular evil that's out there. And so a lot of people that are very skeptical of that. But what's interesting is that I'm a historian, and so I'm being paid to try to figure out historical connections. And so, and like I suggested, actually, when I originally started my research project, I wasn't thinking of, connecting Darwin to Hitler. It wasn't like I started off thinking, how can I connect these things? It sort of came out of my empirical research. I started doing research on evolutionary ethics in the late 19th century. And one of the things that I found out was that some of the people who were promoting evolutionary ethics in the late 19th century were also promoting euthanasia for people with disabilities. Ernst Haeckel being one of the most prominent figures there. He was a German biologist. He was the leading Darwinist in Germany in the late 19th century and early 20th century.
Haeckel's embryos.
And he was the first German intellectual to promote euthanasia, to promote the killing of disabled babies.
Wow.
And then later on in 1904, that was back in 1870, if I recall correctly, or 1871. And then in 1904, he promoted the killing of adults with disabilities as well. and expanded it. But so I started finding out these kinds of things, started seeing the way that Darwinism was contributed to the devaluing of human life in these kinds of ways. And I also started finding out that the people who were writing about evolutionary ethics in the 1890s and on into the early 1900s were mostly people in the eugenics movement, which was a movement to try to improve human heredity through controlling reproduction in various kinds of ways.
There's a movie, the movie Twins, Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger are they're trying to breed a superhuman, and Danny DeVito's all the junk, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is all the good stuff. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen the movie though.
Yeah. And it has eugenic undertones.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. And the eugenics movement was a pretty powerful movement in the United States as well as Germany and Britain, but especially in Germany and the United States in the early 20th century. And so I started finding that these people were pushing eugenics. And of course, eugenics was very much a part of Nazi ideology as well, and euthanasia, the euthanasia program the Nazis ran. And so I started, finding these connections that were just, flying in the face at me. And then as I started thinking more and more about the way that racism was being integrated also into a lot of the Darwinian thinking in the late 19th century, there were a lot of German social Darwinists who were pushing racism and even racial extermination, talking about how the Australian Aborigines were being killed off by the Europeans, and that this was a part of the natural struggle for existence. And there were quite a few thinkers that were upholding these kinds of ideas. So these kinds of ideas were being promoted by people back in the 1870s, even 1860s, 1870s, long before Hitler was even born, were ideas that Hitler was later going to take off with.
Now, it's very interesting to me because so what we're looking at here is you've got a person that believes in God. You've got a person that generally believes in evolution. If you believe in God and that God made people and that all people came from Adam and Eve, then what you have is you have this you have all people are equal, essentially, right? God created all men equally, versus if we've evolved, then one race is more evolved than another. How does somebody like one of the new atheists, like Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or somebody, how do they respond to these kind of claims that, because that's got to make you look bad when you're like, hey, I believe in evolution. We could put bumper stickers. If you believe in evolution, then you believe one race is better than another. That's going to make you look bad. How do people respond to that when you bring this up?
Well, most Darwinists, of course, today don't believe that the racial differences make people that unequal, which I think, but in the late 19th century, they actually did for the most part. Most Darwinists in the late 19th and early 20th century, if you read anthropological works, if you read biology textbooks, they all taught racial inequality and that it was a natural part and that it came out of the natural struggle for existence. And because one of the things that you have to get evolution off the ground is variation.
Yeah.
And racial variation was considered to be one of those things. Now, most Darwinists today, of course, because of the way that the history of racism and the history of the progressives and movement and everything like that, want to steer as far clear as racism as they can. There are a few exceptions to that, however. James Watson, the co-discoverer of the double helix model of DNA, for example, has made some racist utterance that have stirred a lot of controversy. But there is a certain amount of logic to that idea that some races would be more developed than others. And Darwin himself clearly believed that some races were more developed than others, both intellectually and also, interestingly, morally. As I've studied evolutionary ethics, they think that some races have higher morality than others. And this was also Hitler's view too.
Now that's interesting because I had a scientist who was an atheist come to my class. I had taught a whole, I teach on this subject too, and I had a whole unit on evolution and evolutionary ethics and all this stuff. And I like to bring in an atheistic evolutionary scientist to my class and let him teach for an hour and let the students question him. And a couple of my students started asking him, where do you get your morals from? And I was very surprised. Well, I don't think he was expecting the question, but he immediately said, they said, do you get your morals from evolution? And he said, oh, that would be an awful place to get your morals from. And I was thinking to myself, well, if you don't get them from there, then where do you get them? But he said, hey, survival of the fittest would promote, murder, oppression, potentially rape, all sorts of things. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, what's left? But that's what I hear most often is that morals are simply a byproduct of our evolution. And you've written a book on, these sorts of issues. can somebody justify the idea that evolution produces morals?
Well, there's actually two different viewpoints that you have to think about here when you're thinking about this particular question. One is, can you derive your morality from the evolutionary process? But that's a separate question from whether morality could have evolved as an instinct, within a human being. Those are two different kinds of questions. And Richard Dawkins, for example, would say that morality has evolved within the human species. It's part of our instinctual makeup or biological makeup and such. And so we have that. But he would not say that therefore we should base our morality on the struggle for existence, because the morality that has come about biologically has created group cohesion and other kinds of things, and has allowed us to cooperate and other kinds of things like that. But what was still true, though, no matter what they want to claim, what is still the case, though, is that morality has no objective basis. There's nothing that is universal about it. In fact, Darwin very clearly believed that different races had different moralities, and certainly different species had different moralities. And in fact, interestingly, you were talking about at the top of the hour about the 2009 celebrations over Darwinism. And I was actually here in San Diego at San Diego State University at the conference. I don't know if that's where you were, but I was at San Diego State University at a conference about the impact of Darwinism on the humanities and social sciences and such. And I was presenting a paper there too. And when I was talking with different people there, but one of the guys that was there was a rap artist named Baba Brinkman, who had been commissioned to do these rap songs about evolution and everything for the celebration of the year. But he got up and he said, basically, that there are some species like black widows who, after they mate, they eat their mate. Yeah. And he said it's just a flip of the coin. He said that's not what we're like. And he said if that's what we'd have been like, that's what all of our moral and religious systems would have revolved around. Killing our mate after
how awful
after mating. So and Darwin and many other Darwinists in the late 19th and early 20th century were saying sort of similar kinds of things, that it didn't really, that there's no, that the fact that we do one behavior rather than another is just something that's a chance event that's taken place because it helped us in the struggle for existence.
And essentially that means anything's permissible. I mean, because who's to say that we're not moving in that direction already? Sure,
because selfishness also, even though a lot of times the people that talk about this stuff want to focus on the cooperation, but selfishness also evolved too. And so all the other behaviors you're going to have to explain too. Warfare, you're going to have to explain genocide, all these other things, they're natural too.
Oh my goodness. My guest today is Dr. Richard Weikart. Very, very interesting stuff. He is the author of Darwin to Hitler and also a book, The Death of Humanity, that recently came out. And in November, Hitler's Religion is going to come out. So we've got a lot to talk about. Stay with us. We're going to be right back. I'm your host today, Kevin Conover.
Before I bring my need, I will bring my heart.
This is Throughout All Ages Ministry with Joe and Stacy. We would like to equip you to share the gospel with confidence in a biblical and effective way.
We would like to teach you through the proclamation of the gospel.
Whether you're the skeptic, God who created you said that he has made himself known to you so that you are without excuse.
One-on-one evangelism.
How do you think you can get to heaven? I've never really thought about it, but I've always just thought of, doing good.
For more information, go to throughoutallages.com, like us on Facebook, or visit us at YouTube at Throughout All Ages.
Not all home inspections are created equal. Joe DeMars and his team at Housemaster have performed inspections in San Diego for 22 years plus and performed over 10,000 inspections for commercial, multiple family, apartments, and residential. Call before you buy or sell. You'll have confidence knowing the true condition of the property. Call 619-660-7866. sandiego.housemaster.com. Home inspections done right, guaranteed. 619-660-7866.
Imagine restoring your health in a peaceful cabin in the forests of Julian, California. Milan Chessman knows the power of nutrition, detox, cleansing, and fasting. She is a 34-year pioneer, best-selling author, and nutritionist, and personally supervises and cares for you with a servant's heart. See testimonials and solutions for common health problems at a1fastingretreat.com, 619-562-5446.
How can you live in San Diego and miss out on enjoying the water, FASTLANE Kayaking sells popular Hobie Cat kayaks that you pedal, not paddle. That means your hands are left free for fishing and fun. Just throw these on your roof rack. They're light and they're easy to use and maintain. Just rinse them off. Try one free on a demo ride. For 36 years, Ron and Debbie Lane have served San Diego with fun, family-friendly water sports of all kinds. Learn more. FastLaneSailing.com. 619-222-0766.
I'm giving it all away. No more hiding, no more stalling. I hear you calling me.
Thanks for tuning in to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover, and my website is educateforlife.org. You can also like us on Facebook. We're on Facebook. Please check us out. I love feedback. Any shows that are particularly helpful to you, that's wonderful. We're also on YouTube, educateforlifevideo.com, and you can check us out there. And my guest today, Dr. Richard Weikart, has done a lot of studying on European history. He has a PhD in modern European history from the University of Iowa. He currently teaches up at Cal State Stanislaus. Where is that exactly, Dr. Weikart?
That's in Turlock in the Central Valley, about halfway between Sacramento and Fresno.
Okay, great. Is there a lot of people there? Little people? Is that a big town? Or
the town, Turlock's about 70,000, I think. Or something like that. And the university is about 8,000 to 9,000.
That's fantastic. Okay, and Dr. Weikart, you wrote Darwin to Hitler. Mm-hmm. You wrote your second book, The Death of Humanity. What is The Death of Humanity about?
Yes, actually my fifth book.
Oh, I'm sorry, your fifth book.
The Death of Humanity is a book that looks at the way that secular ideologies since the Enlightenment period have eroded the Judeo-Christian sanctity of life ethic, and thus bringing us into what some people refer to as a culture of death today, where abortion, infanticide, euthanasia, and other bioethical issues like that are sort of common among, especially the intelligentsia of our society. And what I basically look at a very broad range of ideologies. I teach a course on European intellectual history, and I basically take almost all of those ideologies that I cover in that class. Materialism, positivism, utilitarianism, socialism, behaviorist psychology, Freudian psychology, and many more. And I look at how they have impacted our thinking about human life and the value of human life. And I show that basically, if you discard the idea of God and that humans are created in the image of God, that then you have to fall back on the idea that humans are just a chance product of eons of time and thus don't have any intrinsic value. And of course, there are a lot of intellectuals today that will actually say that point blank.
Yeah.
Peter Singer, for example. I debated Peter Singer in April on, or I think it's actually aired in early May, on Unbelievable, a radio station out of London.
Now, where is Peter Singer at? He's at
Princeton.
Princeton,
He's at Princeton now. Yeah.
Now, he's the one who said that, isn't his view that you can actually abort a baby after it's born? You can commit infanticide, essentially?
Yes, correct. He does not believe that a newborn baby has a right to life. In fact, he doesn't believe there is such a thing as a right to life, but he believes that only certain traits that humans have are what give them value, and it's particularly rationality. So a baby he doesn't think has enough rationality to be even as valuable as some other animals. So he thinks that, say, a full-grown ape is worth more than a human baby.
Whoa.
Because it has a greater amount of rationality.
And we just had this whole issue with the gorilla that brought that kind of into the forefront, whether they should have shot the gorilla or not, or they should have let the kid die.
Right.
And a lot of people were saying they should have let the kid die.
Yeah. But there are a lot of...
Is that what you're talking about in this Death of Humanity?
I do talk about those kinds of issues.
Yeah.
But and many more. I talk about a whole range of ideologies that have contributed to this undermining of the sanctity of life ethic and led us to a place where we don't value human life anymore, and where sometimes animals are valued more than humans, or humans are just seen as machines sometimes.
Yeah. Now, as believers in God, obviously this is important. What is the call on our lives here? What is the... when somebody puts your book down and they walk away from that book, what is it that you're hoping they take away, and how do you want that to impact them and change the way they live?
Well, one of the things I hope that it will impact them in realizing that if we're going to confront the forces of death in our society, such as the pro-abortion people and the people pushing for euthanasia, which is becoming very strong now in the United States.
And specifically
California.
euthanasia, you're talking about
physician-assisted suicide, such as we have in California now.
Now, you're 100% against physician-assisted. I hear people say, "Hey, this person wants to die, let them die." Where do we draw that line?
Well, I actually cover suicide in the book too. The notion that suicide was universally condemned in Western culture because of the Christian influence until the Enlightenment period. And only in the Enlightenment period did people begin to think that suicide, and again, it was among secular thinkers. David Hume was one of the more prominent figures in the 18th century who wrote an essay on suicide where he began thinking that it was acceptable to commit suicide. And so, I'm completely opposed to committing suicide because our lives are not our own. We've been created in the image of God, and He has rights over us in that sense. We're not just autonomous.
All the way back in the beginning of Genesis.
Anything that we want to do. What I'm hoping that people, when they read my book, will recognize that we have to confront these secular ideologies on a lot of different levels if we're going to win the fight for life. That it's not just about proving that the fetus has these characteristics and such. Those are important things. I'm not belittling that. That needs to be done. But we need to fight for a broader front too, intellectually, at our universities, at our schools, and such, by confronting these dehumanizing ideas.
So what is the broader front in the sense that, so as a Christian, I believe a person is made in the image of God. They have intrinsic value. They have value because of who they are, not just because of what they do, or not just because of their rationality. Mm-hmm. It's literally because they are human, made in the image of God. What are some other avenues in which that we need to take that fight? Because on a university campus, I'm going to be at a standstill if I say to somebody, "I believe we're made in the image of God," and they say, "I believe we're not." And what are some of the other avenues that you're discussing here in which we need to bring that argument to bear?
Well, one of the things that I try to do is I try to show the inconsistencies in the worldviews of the people who are pushing these kind of secular ideologies, and just to give one kind of example, and I think you can do this in a polite way with people who are secularists who you run into who you do disagree with on what the view of humanity would be. By trying to press them and ask them questions about try to figure out where they do really value humans. So to give an example, I will sometimes ask people, well, what about Hitler? Since I study Hitler, I'm an expert on Hitler. I was talking when I was at San Diego State, for instance, at the conference I was mentioned earlier. I asked a graduate student in philosophy who told me that he believes in evolutionary ethics, that morality just evolved. I said, well, what do you do with Hitler? What do you think about him? And finally, after a bunch of hemming and hawing and saying, well, I don't really like Hitler, he finally said, well, Hitler's okay. And I thought, this guy, I hope, went home and thought about what he said. If he didn't, there's obviously there is nothing I can do to him if that's really the position he wants to take, that Hitler's neither good nor bad. And but I think most people are going to flinch at that one. They're not going to say, "Oh, well, I guess that's all right." I guess Hitler. Most people realize that there is some kind of objective morality, and so we need to press and find out where that is in their life. And it might be in places where they're pushing a progressive morality. Jerry Coyne, for example. Jerry Coyne is an atheist. He's an evolutionary biologist at the University of Chicago. And he basically believes that there is no objective morality, that morality has just evolved over time. But then he makes inconsistent statements in his book Fact versus Faith, for example. He talks about how he thinks secular morality is superior to religious morality. Well, how can it be superior if there's nothing to judge it by? So there's no yardstick around. But he does want to think that certain kinds of morality is better than others, and that he thinks the progressive kind of stuff that's going on in Europe is better than what we got in the United States. And so he does have this sense in which he thinks there is some yardstick. And so I think we should press those kind of things. And Jerry Coyne, for example, says that he thinks we should be able to commit euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide because, after all, we have compassion on our dogs. We put them down. So why can't we treat humans like animals? But he didn't want us to treat humans like animals. If I went to New York, so I said, well, Jerry, let's go to New York City and let's round up all the homeless people and sterilize them and then lock them up until someone gives them a home. of course we're not going to do that, but that's what we do to dogs.
Yeah.
We round them up, stray dogs, and sterilize them and lock them up until someone will take them home.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic point. My guest today is Dr. Richard Weikart, and we are discussing Darwin to Hitler and the death of humanity. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Hitler's religion. Is it true that he was a Christian, or is that just some sort of a myth that people are perpetuating to try to make Christianity look bad? Stay with us. We're going to be right back.
We've been given a call.
In 1947, Gordon Tucker began serving San Diego County families. Today, the family tradition continues with 2 stores, Tucker's Valley Furniture and Cash and Carry, both right across the street in El Cajon at Main and Mollison. Whether you want today's modern, eco-friendly furniture or authentic Amish furniture from solid cherry wood built in America, let the Tucker family serve your family. Learn more at tuckersvalleyfurniture.com, a proud sponsor of Educate for Life with Kevin Conover.
When you need tires or service, count on Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service in Oceanside for a full range of affordable options and all the brands you trust. See their great customer reviews and special offers online. Hours Tuesday through Friday, 7:30 to 5:30, and Saturdays, 7:30 to 5. Call Dan and his team at 760-439-1631. Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service, 2405 Oceanside Boulevard in Oceanside, 760-439-1631. Not all home inspections are created equal. Joe DeMars and his team at Housemaster have performed inspections in San Diego for 22 years plus and performed over 10,000 inspections for commercial, multiple family, apartments, and residential. Call before you buy or sell. You'll have confidence knowing the true condition of the property. Call 619-660-7866, sandiego.housemaster.com. Home inspections, done right, guaranteed. 619-660-7866.
Hi, this is Jason Hall, president of Team Home Loans, a branch of Synergy One Lending. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Conover for the profound impact he's had on mine and my wife's spiritual life, as well as being an incredible teacher while our kids were his students. His knowledge and passion have taught us all how important it is to be defenders of our faith. It's our honor and privilege to support Kevin and his show. It is our sincere hope and prayer that you will continue to learn to be defenders of your faith through Kevin's radio show and through his Educate for Life teachings. Thank you, Kevin, from the Hall family and Team Home Loans.
How can you live in San Diego and miss out on enjoying the water? FASTLANE Kayaking sells popular Hobie Cat kayaks that you pedal, not paddle. That means your hands are left free for fishing and fun. Just throw these on your roof rack. They're light and they're easy to use and maintain. Just rinse them off. Try one free on a demo ride. For 36 years, Ron and Debbie Lane have served San Diego with fun, family-friendly water sports of all kinds. Learn more. FastlaneSailing.com. 619-222-0766.
There's got to be more than going back and forth, from doing right to doing wrong, 'cause we were taught that's who we are.
Welcome to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover, and check us out on YouTube, our podcast. You can visit us on Facebook. If you'd like to get a recording of today's show, you can pick it up on my website, and all kinds of fantastic stuff. My guest today is Dr. Richard Weikart, and he is an expert on the relationship of Darwinism to Hitler and his philosophical views, as well as so much more. Dr. Weikart knows a ton. You can check him out on his website, darwintohitler.com. He's also a senior fellow at the Discovery Institute. If you don't know about the Discovery Institute, you should make yourself familiar with it. They are absolutely phenomenal and just doing world-changing stuff over there. So fantastic stuff. So Dr. Weikart, is it true that Hitler was a Christian? What's going on there?
Yeah, well, that's one of the prominent views, of course, of many atheists and secularists who want to tar Christianity with Hitler. And of course, there's some complexity to this question because Hitler at times did identify himself as a Christian, especially in his earlier political career when he was trying to pander to the sensibilities of a lot of the German public who identified themselves largely as Christians. And so the German public was largely nominally Christian. And so Hitler on a couple of occasions, and there's one particular speech in April 1922, that's quoted quite frequently, where Hitler talked about Jesus as being his Lord and Savior and such. However, what I do in my book, Hitler's Religion, that's going to be coming out in November, is I sort of put that to the test by looking at several things, such as what Hitler said in private versus what he said in public.
Yeah.
And also what Hitler's colleagues said about his religious views and what he had shared with them and such.
Now, is it true that he came into conflict with the German church?
Yes, there were conflicts between him and the German church, and most people who acknowledge that said, well, he was in conflict with the institutional church because they weren't, the institutional churches, we should say, because there was the two largest churches were Catholic in the South and Protestant in the North. But that didn't mean that he was giving up on Christianity altogether, that he just had maybe a different form of Christianity or something like that. And the Nazi 25-point program did actually say that the Nazis stood for what they called positive Christianity without promoting one particular confession, meaning one denomination. But if you look at Hitler's private utterances, and maybe one that's very typical and that very enlightening, when Hitler was in prison after the beer hall putsch in 1925, one of his colleagues, Rudolf Hess, who was one of Hitler's closest friends and he was private personal secretary, Hess got in a conversation about religion with someone else in the prison, and Hitler stayed out of the conversation. But after the conversation was over, Hitler told Hess that he had to play the hypocrite. And not speak against Christianity, even though he himself was non-Christian. So there were times.
There's a record of that conversation.
Oh yeah, Hess wrote to his wife about it, and so we have the letter that Hess wrote. And I have that I quote this in my book, Hitler's Religion, so you can find it there. So there were places where Hitler in private was clearly not was opposed to Christianity, but publicly he had to portray an image because he knew that it was be a disaster if he came out, to be anti-Christian publicly.
Yeah.
And in fact, he even says this in Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf is very interesting. If you read the entire Mein Kampf, there's actually two different sections. One of which he says that we need to be careful we don't offend anyone's religious sensibilities, and he said that was exactly what went wrong with this Viennese politician named Georg von Schönerer, who had been active when Hitler was living in Vienna in the first decade of the 20th century. Schöner had led a free from Rome movement, calling people to get out of the Catholic Church, and Hitler saw that was a political disaster, and it was.
Yeah.
So Hitler warned against doing that same thing. So that's part of the context that Hitler doesn't want to offend people religiously because he knows it'll lead down the path to a political oblivion. But if you read later in the second volume of Mein Kampf, Hitler actually does make some very negative comments about Christianity. I forgot the exact term that he used about it, but he basically said that it brought terror into the ancient world and that we need to meet terror with terror. And so he basically does make clear that he does want to suppress Christianity at that point. There's really a really fascinating thing that I found too that I didn't know about before I went into doing this study too. I started looking for illustrations about Hitler's religion. I came across a really fascinating one where in 1932, Hitler's private photographer Heinrich Hoffmann took a photo of Hitler leaving a church.
Yes, I've seen that photo.
And there's a cross over Hitler's head.
Yep.
Very bright cross over Hitler's head, gives a halo effect or whatever.
Yeah.
And the caption says something about Hitler, the supposed heretic, coming out of the church in Bremerhaven. Well, what I knew about that photo to some degree, because actually it's on the dust jacket of a book called The Holy Reich, where a scholar named Richard Steinman Gall tries to claim that Hitler did have Christian sympathies. What's interesting, though, is that after Hitler came to power, in 1938, there's another edition of that book, the same book that had that photo in it, that came out, where the cross was airbrushed out of the photograph. And so there's no cross any longer.
Wow.
And the caption was changed to the photograph. It now reads something like, Hitler after sightseeing in the historic church in Bremerhaven.
That's crazy.
So Hitler was distancing himself from Christianity by making that change. And Hoffmann and Hitler were very close. And it's pretty clear that change wasn't kind of made by Hoffmann without Hitler's idea. I mean, Hitler clearly was behind it. We don't have a lot of details about that. But interestingly, they airbrushed that cross out of it, though, and that
That's
thing
very
it's for Hitler to distance himself from Christianity more. And then if you read Hitler's later comments in his table talks, there's Hitler's Table Talks, and here I'm using the German editions because the English edition actually was called into question. I think rightly so. It's not particularly reliable, but there's just as many anti-Christian statements in the German editions of the Table Talks. If you read those, I mean, Hitler is very clear about his opposition to Christianity. And if you look at Hitler's secretary's testimony, she wrote a memoir, for example, Traudl Junge. She talks about Hitler being anti-Christian and it was a very common theme, too, that Hitler talked about. He talked about Christianity an awful lot in those Table Talks. And we also have Rosenberg's diaries, Goebbels' diaries, both of which give us renditions, sometimes which are of the same conversations.
These guys kept a lot of diaries.
They did.
Good for us.
And so we have information that makes pretty clear Hitler's anti-Christian viewpoint.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, people are kind of battling here. Hitler's your problem. Hitler's your problem, right? Is he evolution's problem? Is he Darwin's problem? Or is he Christianity's problem? And you're kind of working through this and showing people, hey, he was no Christian. And is it true that he actually started his own religion in a sense? I've heard that he actually kind of rewrote the Bible or rewrote the Ten Commandments, that you could actually be baptized into Nazism. Is that true?
No, not that I'm aware of. There were different rites and ceremonies that some of the neo-pagan Nazi officials tried to promote. But Hitler was not a neo-pagan. And that's one thing I do show in my book as well. Himmler and Hess and Rosenberg were very interested in neo-paganism and sometimes occultism.
Yeah.
Hitler was very opposed to the occult. And there's a very interesting story about that, too, because Hitler would talk behind their backs against Hess and Himmler because of their occult interests. And when Hess fled Germany and flew to Scotland and parachuted out of there, Hitler blamed it on occultists. He blamed it on astrologers. And so he ordered Himmler and the SS to round up the astrologers, and they did. They had this roundup of astrologers and prognosticators and such in Nazi Germany right in the early June. Hess had fled in May of 1941, and then so in June, they rounded up a bunch of these people. But what's interesting is that Himmler, who'd been officially in charge of this sweep, went ahead and took one of these astrologers named Wilhelm Wolff and got him out of the concentration camp to be his personal astrologer.
Oh, God. There's all kinds of crazy stuff in history. Boy, very interesting. My guest today is Dr. Richard Weikart, and he is an expert on European history, and specifically, he's written several books on Hitler, his relationship to Darwinism, and his religion. So we're going to be right back. We have one more segment to go, and we'll finish off this amazing discussion. Stay with us.
Imagine restoring your health in a peaceful cabin in the forests of Julian, California. Milan Chessman knows the power of nutrition, detox, cleansing, and fasting. She is a 34-year pioneer, best-selling author, and nutritionist, and personally supervises and cares for you with a servant's heart. See testimonials and solutions for common health problems at a1fastingretreat.com, 619-562-5446.
Hi, this is Jason Hall, president of Team Home Loans, a branch of Synergy One Lending. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Conover for the profound impact he's had on mine and my wife's spiritual life, as well as being an incredible teacher while our kids were his students. His knowledge and passion have taught us all how important it is to be defenders of our faith. It's our honor and privilege to support Kevin and his show. It is our sincere hope and prayer that you will continue to learn to be defenders of your faith through Kevin's radio show and through his Educate for Life teachings. Thank you, Kevin, from the Hall family and Team Home Loans.
In 1947, Gordon Tucker began serving San Diego County families. Today, the family tradition continues with 2 stores, Tucker's Valley Furniture and Cash and Carry, both right across the street in El Cajon at Main and Mollison. Whether you want today's modern, eco-friendly furniture or authentic Amish furniture from solid cherry wood built in America, let the Tucker family serve your family. Learn more at tuckersvalleyfurniture.com, a proud sponsor of Educate for Life with Kevin Conover.
I will cast my cares on you. You're the anchor of my hope, the only one who's in control.
Welcome to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover, and my website is educateforlife.org. I have a fully online curriculum that you can take if you would like to become well-versed in the truth of God's word. We have a website, unshakablefaith.com. You can actually sign up there. It's got all kinds of stuff. We cover everything you can imagine about religions, about how the Bible was put together, about creation and evolution, and intelligent design, and all these sorts of things. My guest today is Dr. Richard Weikart, and his website is darwintohitler.com. He has some fantastic books. Darwin to Hitler, The Death of Humanity is another one of his books, and a book coming out in November is Hitler's Religion, and all amazing stuff. If you've been listening to our show so far, it's been very, very interesting. And Dr. Weikart, we left off talking about how Hitler was definitely not a Christian. It's very obvious through the writings of others as well as his own writings. But at the same time, he wasn't into paganism. He wasn't starting his own religion. So what did he believe? What was his thought processes? And how did Darwinism influence him in the decisions he made in regards to things like the Holocaust and so forth? Yeah, well, I also show, interestingly, he not only was not a Christian, he was not an occultist, but he also was not an atheist. He does speak very clearly and often, both in public and in private, that he did believe in some kind of being, providence. He calls it providence a lot, uses the word God too. But it's sort of a vague idea about God that fits closest to pantheism, I argue, in my book. That is, he thinks that nature is God. And if you read, for instance, Mein Kampf, or his second book, which doesn't have any name to it because it was never published, it's just called Hitler's Second Book. Yeah. If you read either of those two books, you'll notice that nature often is really personified in a way and deified, really. In fact, interestingly, the translators of Mein Kampf, and there's several translators that have done this, have all capitalized nature a lot of the times throughout the book. Now, we don't know if Hitler would have done that personally, because the Germans capitalized all of their nouns, so nature would have been capitalized in Hitler's writing, but that wouldn't have had significance. But it's clear that the translators think it has significance. The translators think that he's talking about more than just nature as we know it. And I think if you read carefully in certain places, there's one passage, for example, that gets quoted an awful lot. In fact, I think it's probably the most quoted passage of Mein Kampf, where Hitler says that by fighting against the Jews, he is doing the work of the Lord. That's a comment that is made in Mein Kampf. It's quoted extensively. Yeah. And many people take that to be, okay, look, Hitler was a believer in God and religion and such. But if you read the surrounding sentences of that, he's talking about nature in the context of that thing. Nature as his Lord. And the very sentence immediately in front of that sentence, he talks about eternal nature. And he talks about nature making commands and such. And so if nature is eternal, then he didn't believe in any kind of creator God. And he uses that term eternal nature a number of times, not just once. And that's not just a slip of the pen or something like that. He uses that term eternal nature a number of other times too, and in speeches and other kind of things too. So he believed that nature was eternal. It is God, in fact. And what's very important about that is that he then drew his ethics from nature, specifically from the Darwinian struggle for existence, which he saw as being a natural law. Yeah. And he talks about that quite often. If you read his second book, for example, he starts off the book talking about the struggle for life, the Lebenskampf in the German. And the word struggle for life is actually the same term that Darwin used as a synonym for the struggle for existence. And Hitler does use the word struggle for existence an awful lot too. Yeah. Existenzkampf, Daseinskampf, those are German words that mean struggle for existence. Yeah. The same things being used by the Darwinists. He does use the word selection an awful lot, referring to natural selection. And he describes the Darwinian process. A lot of people make a lot out of the fact that Hitler never mentions Darwin by name. But if you read carefully, I mean, he describes the Darwinian process. He talks about the population pressure that leads to a struggle between organisms, and this then leads to higher evolution. He uses this term higher evolution. Yeah, is right. So I mean, he describes the process perfectly, and he sees races as being the main focal point in human struggle for existence, and so one race against the other. Why did he conclude that the Aryan race was the superior race from an evolutionary perspective? Well, I think that just came out of his own Germanic bias that he's seeing his own race as being the highest one, and it was a popular idea. I mean, he's not the one that invented the idea, of course. It was an idea that was popular among many other German thinkers at the time before him. So he was drawing on a fund of thought that was already in existence there.
And then what happens too is that the Jews then become counterpoised, not as necessarily the most inferior race, certainly not the most inferior intellectually, but as an immoral race, because he thought that morality was biologically ingrained in us. And so he thought that when the different caricatures of a Jew, like a Jew's greedy and lascivious and deceitful and all these things, he thought those were biological.
So the stereotypes that they had been emblazoned with, he took those as, wow, I've never heard that before. That's very interesting.
And he wasn't the only one. I mean, there were others before. He took most of the ideas that Hitler had were not original ideas. They were really, he pulled from a lot of other thinkers, which is why in my book From Darwin to Hitler, I talk about a lot of those other thinkers that were putting forward these kinds of ideas. But they saw the Jews as being an inferior morally.
Now, practically speaking, what is the lesson of Hitler's thought process? How does that speak to an individual today? What's the warning? What's the lesson from history in looking at that?
Well, of course, today no one embraces Nazism as Nazism. Well, I shouldn't say no one. There are neo-Nazis out there, but in terms of the general public, we don't. However, what I see when I look at the evolutionary ethics, the eugenics movement, which was a movement to improve human heredity, the euthanasia movement in the late 19th and early 20th century, what I see is that these ideologies are devaluing human life. And we see the same thing going on today. It may not be the same human lives, it may be different ones, but I think we really need to get back to the notion of all men are created equal. And so it's not the case that a baby before it's born or even after it's born has less value than an adult because it doesn't have as much rationality or because it doesn't have this trait or that trait. I think that's getting back to the same kind of inequality that was the big problem with Nazism. That's what drove Nazism to begin killing people who they identified as being unequal. And it's what's driving us to kill people that we're identifying as unequal. We're killing babies before they're born, in some cases even after they're born. We're killing people with congenital diseases, especially mental illnesses and diseases. People are beginning to think that we should eliminate them as well. So I think we're getting the same mentality in many ways.
So we really got to counteract this idea. Now, do you think it's evolution in and of itself, or do you think it's something is separate from evolution?
Well, I think you can believe in evolution and still have a view of humans as being created in the image of God, but I'm not sure it's a particularly consistent kind of view. And it's certainly not the view that most Darwinists have. Most of them see humans as being an accidental product of eons of time and thus not having any intrinsic value, certainly in the cosmic sense.
And as we see, and as our society views people without intrinsic value, we're going to continue to see more pain and suffering and hurt in individuals' lives and in the culture as a whole.
Exactly.
And so really we have to get back to, and even scientifically, I mean, the Discovery Institute, which you're a senior fellow at, I mean, their whole point is to show that evolution has incredible flaws in evolutionary theory.
Sure. And one of the things in my thinking about ethics is I'm trying to get people sort of shaken up to realize that they need to re-examine those questions, because people that think those questions are all settled, a lot of times their ethical views are not in line with their scientific views. And so we need to say, okay, which is going to give? Where are you going to go? Are you going to really go down the road of being consistent with your ethical views, or are you going to rethink these other views and think, well, maybe I was wrong about those?
That's fantastic. Dr. Weikart, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Real big blessing. And if you like this show, you can pick up a recording. I encourage you again to visit Dr. Weikart's site. That is darwintohitler.com. We're going to be back here next Saturday, 2 to 3. And thanks for tuning in today. I hope you have a fantastic Saturday. God bless you. I hope your faith in God becomes unshakable.
Did
Take
you
care.
miss part of today's program? Don't worry, we're committed to helping you get the info you need. Okay, that was dumb, but for real. Visit educateforlife.com for podcast and video recordings.